Black Case File for you today. I typically talk about cases and topics that tend to focus on people of color, and the topics vary. Sometimes murders, sometimes history, sometimes mystery, sometimes conspiracy, sometimes a murder mystery conspiracy from history. Anyways, if you like this content, make sure to hit that lovely red subscribe button. You can also find me on Instagram at the Black Case Files. Lastly, I have a little playlist that I add all of these to that should be showing right there. Binge it, have fun, enjoy. Okay, let's get into it. I've been gone for a minute and my last topics were pretty heavy, so I figured today we'll do a little detour. Today's topic is a little different than my normal one. As you saw from the intro clip, today we're going to the circus. The Universoul Circus, to be precise. I remember the Universoul Circus from when I was growing up, and I remember being so excited to see them. I loved it and was completely captivated and enamored by it. Of course, now that I'm older, I understand some of the issues and criticisms of circuses in general, but I loved seeing people who looked like me performing aerials and contortions and high flying. It doesn't discount any of the other issues that are just inherent to circuses in general, which we'll get into a little later. The Universoul Circus is a single ring circus. And just so we're all on the same page, you've heard the phrase three-ring circus, right? A three-ring circus is a circus performed on 3 stages. Therefore, a single ring circus is one that's performed on 1 stage. I always thought that the Universoul Circus was the first of its kind. Turns out, nope. There is quite a history of Black performers, etc. I mean, it's kind of a toss-up on who the first Black circus owner was, whether it was Pablo Fanque or Joseph Hillier. The first major, thanks to Dr. Stephen Ward, who's a historian and written several books on the history of circuses. And this next portion of my video is heavily credited to him. His article is linked below. There's some discussion on who was actually first, as Hillier and Fanque came up at the same time. According to Dr. Ward's research though, Joseph Hillier rose to fame of the circus with Andrew Ducrow before setting himself up as an equestrian director in his own right back in January 1842, which was the same month and year that Fanque establishes his home company. Not a lot is known of Hillier before he joined up with Ducrow. Young children were often apprenticed to circus owners. However, it is suspected that Hillier could not have been any younger than 4 or 5 years old when he was taken on by Ducrow. Throughout his career, Hillier was often billed as the Italian writer or the Milanese youth. Hillier first appeared in England in Ducrow's production of Cortez, or The Conquest of Mexico at Covent Garden. By 1827, he was performing solo, and in August of 1829, he was doing the Cossack riding, which was just lauded from all over the world. There were reports saying he rode with the most extraordinary power of retaining his hold on the horse. He went at full gallop, tumbling, reeling under and over and all about the animal, yet never coming to the ground. By 1836, Hillier was well established with Ducrow, not only as an accomplished performer, but also as the equestrian director. In 1841, that was a very special year for Hillier, although a disastrous one for Ducrow. In June, the theater where Ducrow was the manager was completely destroyed by a fire, and he lost everything, fell into a deep depression, which he never recovered, and he died in January of 1842. Well, Ducrow had held Hillier in high regard, and he left 300 pounds to him, which was more than he had left for anyone else. And so he continued the Ducrow name as the equestrian director. The following year, he went on a European tour to Hamburg and Paris, but it didn't go well. It was a financial disaster. In 1845, he was back in London, insolvent. He blamed the fact that he was illiterate and he had to trust other people to keep up with his bookkeeping. In 1849, the Bombay Times, they recorded the arrival of the Hillier family in India. In 1859, his wife died of dysentery and he remarried in 1862. His profession was given as writing master, and he just continued on until his own death from cholera in 1876. Now, let's go back to Pablo Fanque, who was hailed as the first Black circus proprietor in Britain. He was born in William Darby in 1810 in Norwich, and he's most celebrated as being the first Black circus owner in Britain and possibly the world. We've already talked about Hillier and how he took over at the same time that Fanque launched his own circus. So Fanque was a 3rd generation Black British citizen. As a circus owner, he is often pictured as an equestrian, much like Hillier, but he was also an accomplished acrobat and slack rope performer in his early days. And it wasn't until 1842 that he presented his own company. He became popular, he toured all over the world, especially throughout the north of England. However, he's probably most associated with the collapse of his circus in Leeds in March of 1848, and that was where his wife died. Fanque is indeed an iconic Black figure within the cultural heritage of the circus. but I'd be remiss if I didn't go through the exciting history of circus performers of color at this time. So let's just go through a few of them. There was a character named Snowball, who was a writer of color with Sanger's Circus in 1867, and Joseph Austin, a black bareback rider with Elphinstone Circus in 1889. George Christoph was a celebrated black tightrope performer, and he was in the south of Wales. He was often billed as Herr Christoph, the African tightrope dancer. His father, Kit Christoph, Signor Christoph, was also a performer, and his younger brother, John, performed with them when they were very young. George and John both became famous in their own right. George as Herr Christoph, he performed to much acclaim throughout Britain, being able to throw a somersault on the tightrope. John traveled to Australia with the illegitimate son of Pablo Fanque, where he performed as an acrobat and an equestrian. He toured throughout Australia and New Zealand, and he remained there until his death in 1872 in Sydney. Another one was Macomo, who was one of the first black lion tamers. This is kind of where proprietors often specified a black performer when advertising for performers. During the 19th century, there were many, and some became household names. Delmonico was an Afro-American who came from Britain sometime around 1865, giving his first performance at the Crystal Palace in 1866. He worked with lions, tigers, spotted hyenas, but he ended up having to give up working with wild animals. But he kept working with them in some regard up until his death in 1901. However, the performers of color were not only men, there were also phenomenal female performers as well. African princess seemed to be a very popular trope of the time. There was Mademoiselle Flora. She's called the African princess. She sang and played the guitar while riding on horseback with Adam's Grand Circus. Tilidu, the little African princess, appeared as a bareback rider with Keith's Circus in 1878. And the African princess Zambezia was with Taylor's Circus in 1881, appearing on the tightrope. Then there was another African princess. It was just called Zoo, who appeared with Transfield Circus in 1881. However, there was another quite remarkable figure called Carlos Pablo Paddington. He was a very interesting character. He starts working for Cook's Circus in the 1820s and was often referred to as African or a man of color. However, it turns out that Paddington may have had a secret. He may have possibly been a she. There was an article in 1827. Paddington eventually ceased working with the circus, but continued performing through a variety of other circuses throughout that time. So you had Adam Samwell's, Ryan's, Wallace, to name a few, as well as performing on the Corte Volante, and he also appeared on slack rope and as an equestrian. Pictured, you should see Anna Olga Brown under the performing name of Miss Lala is possibly most well-known black female performer of the period. She was an aerialist and was immortalized by Artist Degas when he sketched her in performance many times during January of 1879. His depictions can actually be seen in the National Gallery in London. She was a larger-than-life character who, thank God, was immortalized by Edgar Degas. Linked below, I have a number of articles that I gathered this information from, and again, big thanks to Dr. Stephen Ward. Now, this is giving a more whimsical look at the circus. One of the darker stories is about the Muse brothers, brothers who were captured in the Jim Crow South and forced into a life of servitude through the circus. Their story is one that will be focused on separately, and now that we have some of the background about black circuses, let's go ahead and dive into the Universoul Circus. This was a bit longer than I expected, so we'll go ahead and put that in part 2. Part 2 will be the next video uploaded, so keep your eyes out for that. It should be uploaded either the next day. I'm uploading this on Monday, so it should be available on the Wednesday. And that's it. Feel free to check me out. I have all my places you can find me linked below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with me.